6 plagues. Not the deadliest 6, but the 6 that reached into human history, grabbed it by the collar, and pointed it somewhere new. One of them broke the world's first democracy. One of them ended serfdom for millions of European peasants almost by accident. And one of them killed so many people across 2 entire continents that it may have cooled the whole planet. The version they taught you in school was the marketing. Here is the invoice. We are going in order, oldest to newest. And the last plague on this list is the one that should scare you the most, because its family of viruses never actually left. This is every plague that reshaped humanity. Explained.
We start in Athens, 430 years before Christ. The city is the shining center of the Greek world, democracy, philosophy, theater, and it is at war with Sparta. The Athenian plan is to pull everyone inside the long walls and let the navy win, so they cram the whole countryside into one walled city. Then the plague arrives. The historian Thucydides was there. He caught it, survived, and wrote it down so precisely that we still read him today. Burning fever, eyes red and inflamed, the tongue and throat filling with blood, foul breath, violent coughing, the skin breaking into pustules and ulcers. Many were dead within 7 to 9 days. It killed perhaps a quarter of the city, as many as 100,000 people. Bodies piled up in the temples.
Families threw their dead on strangers' funeral pyres because there was no wood left. And here is the detail school skips. It may have killed Pericles himself, the leader of Athens. May have. Plutarch says yes, but he wrote that more than 4 centuries later. And Thucydides, who was actually there, never tells us how Pericles died. What we do know is that Athens never fully recovered its nerve. The Golden Age caught a fever, and the fever won.
Move forward almost 600 years to the Roman Empire at the absolute height of its power, the year 165. Roman soldiers come home from a campaign in the east, and they bring something back with them. We call it the Antonine Plague, after the family name of the emperor Marcus Aurelius. Doctors call it the Plague of Galen, because the great physician Galen watched it happen and wrote down what he saw. Raging fever, black eruptions that dried and flaked off the skin, diarrhea, a stench of decay. At its worst, it was killing as many as 2,000 people a day in the city of Rome alone. Across the empire, it may have taken 10 to 15% of the entire population, somewhere between 1.5 and 25 million people.
It hollowed out the army and drained the treasury at the exact moment Rome could least afford it. It may even have killed a co-emperor, Lucius Verus. We still do not know for certain what the disease was. Smallpox and measles are the leading suspects, and honestly, historians still argue about it. What nobody argues about is this. The empire that looked invincible had just been shown its own ceiling.
Now the year 541, and the city of Constantinople. The Emperor Justinian has a dream to reconquer the Western Roman Empire and make Rome whole again. He is winning. And then his own capital begins to die. This is the first pandemic in history we can name with certainty. In the year 2013, scientists pulled the DNA of the bacterium Yersinia pestis out of ancient teeth, the same bacterium behind the Black Death, arriving 8 centuries early. The court historian Procopius says it was killing 10,000 people a day in Constantinople. That number is almost certainly exaggerated. Historians think the real peak was closer to 5,000 a day, which is not much comfort. There was no room to bury anyone. Bodies were stacked in the open air. It killed about 1/5 of the capital. Justinian himself caught the plague, and unlike so many of his subjects, he survived it. But his dream did not. The empire never again had the men or the money to finish the reconquest.
How many died across the whole Mediterranean is genuinely debated. Some say tens of millions, and a recent study argues the older estimates were wildly inflated. Either way, the map of the future had just been redrawn.
800 years later, the same bacterium comes back for the main event. 1347. Genoese trading ships dock in Europe carrying the dead and the dying. And over the next 4 years, the Black Death does something almost impossible to picture. It kills between 30 and 60% of everyone in Europe. Not of one city, of a continent. The symptoms gave the disease its nickname. Swellings called buboes, the size of eggs or apples, erupting in the groin and the armpits, fingers and noses turning black with gangrene. Whole villages emptied. Flagellants whipped themselves bloody through the streets, begging God to make it stop. And then, something nobody expected happened next.
With a third to a half of all workers suddenly dead, the survivors discovered they were worth something. There were not enough hands left to work the land, so wages shot up. In England, farm wages jumped 20 to 40% and stayed high for more than a century. Lords who tried to force peasants back into serfdom found the peasants could simply walk to the next estate and get hired on the spot. The plague did what no revolution had managed. It broke the back of feudalism. For the first time, ordinary people could afford fresh meat and better bread. The greatest catastrophe in European history was also, for the survivors, a raise. Now, the death toll stops being regional and turns planetary. 1520. Smallpox steps off a Spanish ship and into the Americas, 2 continents whose people had never met the virus and had no immunity to it at all. What follows is called the Great Dying. In the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, smallpox killed something like 40% of the population in a single year and helped a few hundred Spaniards topple an empire of millions. Across the Inca world, between 60 and 90. And here is the part that sounds invented, but comes from real climate science. So many people died, and so much farmland grew back into forest, that the returning trees pulled a measurable amount of carbon dioxide out of the sky. A study published in the year 2019 calculated that this reforestation helped push global carbon levels down and deepen the cooling we now call the Little Ice Age. Read that again. A plague killed so many human beings that it changed the temperature of the entire planet. Humanity has never done anything on that scale, before or since.
Which brings us to the last one, and the one that should worry you most, because it is the most recent and its family never left. 1918. As the First World War ends, a strain of influenza sweeps the earth and infects around 1 in every 3 human beings alive. It kills an estimated 50 million people, more than the war that had just finished. But the horror was not only the number. Normal flu takes the very young and the very old. This one drew a third spike right in the middle of the graph, killing healthy adults in their 20s and 30s. The leading explanation is a cytokine storm, a strong immune system overreacting so violently that it floods its own lungs. Victims turned blue from lack of oxygen and drowned inside their own bodies, sometimes within a single day.
And the name is a lie. We call it the Spanish flu only because neutral Spain printed the truth, while wartime censors everywhere else buried it. Here is the loop that never closes. The 1918 virus was an H1N1 influenza, and that family of viruses is still circulating right now. Every other plague on this list eventually burned itself out. This last one only went quiet. The invoice is still open. 6 plagues. 6 times history changed course, whether the people living through it understood it or not. So here is the question for the comments. Which one of these should Chronica cover in full, the whole story, beginning to end? Tell us below, because every answer becomes the next video. The version they taught you was the marketing. You just read the invoice. Subscribe,
and we will keep opening the books.